Hi everyone, welcome to another arts loving, comics loving, film and media loving edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. Delighted on this episode to be talking with an artist and creator who's worked in a variety of spaces, including Animal Home, the sequel to Animal House, beloved classic, and someone whose work I really, really enjoy, and that is artist Jack Pittman. Jack, thank you for jumping in and joining.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. We did not get the Tonight Show music cued in. There will be some music. It's usually kind of a nice, mellow, sort of groove kind of thing that I add into the videos. But I would probably have to then pay NBC or somebody to use the Tonight Show.
I
So
imagine Doc Severinsen would need some retirement income.
that's right. Exactly. Exactly. The royalties are there. Um, and so, well, let's start by talking about some of your creative origin. What connected you with the arts and creating in general?
Well, I've been drawing since I was 3 years old. You know, most kids, I think, start drawing. You're drawing before preschool and then in kindergarten. And there are a
Hmm.
few of us that just keep on drawing. And I was one of those few that had a lot of positive reinforcement from my parents and classmates and teachers and all. And so I just kept doing it. By the time I got to high school, everybody was wanting me to do their campaign posters, which I did,
Hmm.
emulating Mort Drucker and Jack Davis and a lot of the Mad Crew, and incidentally got to pal around with them and be part of the usual gang later on in life.
Very cool.
So that was quite a thrill. And my dad used to read the Sunday comics to my brother and me when we were kids. We'd get at one end of the sofa and peep over the armrest behind him as he's lying down reading the comics. And so that's my introduction to comic strips. And and he could draw a little bit, not really. He was more engineering oriented than artistic. But he would draw Bringing Up Father, Maggie, and jigs. He'd draw jigs for me, and so I just thought that was so cool that you could draw somebody from the comics page, and I started doing it too. And about that time, of course, Popeye was on the air in reruns from the Max Fleischer years, and later in the 50s, as a new version of Popeye came out. And so I would draw him as sitting there watching the cartoon on the screen. That was my introduction to life drawing.
Nice,
um,
nice.
yeah, it wasn't real people, but it was just might as well have been. They were moving around faster than you could draw. So it was a good experience, which later on in my life, when I was working with the News and Observer as a editorial, sports cartoonist, illustrator, all purpose artist.
Hmm.
I was also a courtroom artist for them.
Oh,
And
wow.
that experience of drawing real fast from TV was good experience to draw the courtroom episodes. And I did quite a few famous trials. In fact, the Dr. Jeffrey McDonald that was made into the movie and book Fatal Vision. I was
Hmm.
the courtroom artist for that.
Oh,
So
wow.
it was really cool to be involved in a lot of those things. Years later, I was invited by NBC to be the courtroom artist for John Edwards when he was running for office.
Hmm.
Um, had some issues in his life that he was going to have to go to court about. But I was on call for them, but it never got that far, so I didn't get to work on that one. But a lot of early ones were a lot of fun. And the newspaper in itself was a really good experience because you can imagine drawing for a deadline. This was when the News and Observer had also the morning paper, the Raleigh Times,
Hmm.
or I guess it was the evening paper, but for us it was morning because we were working in the morning for the evening paper. And we there were many times that the editor would come running in and say, "There's a hole on the front page. We need something quick to fill in this hole." And I only had like 30 minutes to think up the idea, to draw it, send it to the engravers to shoot it and make the printing plates and get it on the press in time.
Wow.
So that was a really good experience preparing me for the tight deadlines I'd have with ad agencies years later. Now, I didn't start out that. I mean, I knew I wanted to be a cartoonist all my life. But when I was in high school, you know how you go through the drill with this guidance counselor, and I was a good student, a straight A student. So she said, "Well, you're good in math and you're artistic. You would be a perfect architect." So I went to school, the School of Design at NC State, and majored in architecture. But at the same time, I was working at the local PBS TV affiliate in the art department. And so I was doing a lot of variety of things there that I really enjoyed, illustrating camera cards for the TV shows they produced, the Woodwright Shop, all those kinds of things. And one day they came in and said, "We're thinking we need some animation of a volcano erupting for the TV science program. Can you do animation?" And I said, "Sure." Never did, but I'd done plenty of flip books as a kid. And so they bought all this great stuff, the animation table, you know, with the circular rotational device on it, and all of the cells that are pre-punched with fit on the pegs. And so I just taught myself on the job there, inking on the front, painting on the backside of the acetate, and they shot it, and it turned out well. So by the end of the year, the art director there said, "You know, I don't want to tell you how to run your life, but you'd be making a big mistake going to architecture. You're so good at this." And I didn't need a lot of arm twisting. So by the time it was too late to change my major, but by the time I got near graduation, I pretty well decided I was going to be an illustrator slash cartoonist, and that's when I graduated. I actually graduated with honors in architecture, and
Oh, cool.
I did do a few architectural projects in my summers off. I worked with architects firm and designed the lighthouse at the marina and clubhouse at Seven Lakes, North Carolina, near Pinehurst.
Hmm.
And I guess the lighthouse is still there, or maybe it's the Leaning Tower. I don't know. But I was sure I wanted to be an illustrator and cartoonist. And so when the time came to graduate, I coincidentally heard there was a job opening at the News and Observer, and went there, showed them my portfolio. I was hired on the spot. It was near November where they come out with their big ACC basketball issue. And my very first assignment with them, in order to get the job, was a trial project to do the full page splash page of the ACC basketball. Had to draw a collage of all the stars from the
Hmm.
1940s to the 1970s. And I mean, it was a real baptism of fire for
Yeah.
my first project. And they loved it and hired me on the spot. So that was just a great experience. The paper was really good about letting me do what I wanted to do. I came up with these ideas. I go to the sports editor and I said, you know, I'd like to do an ACC comic strip, you know, featuring all the mascots, and every week they're in some kind of shenanigans with the game coming up, or you know, displaying what happened after the game, who
Hmm.
won, who lost, and they were. I was thinking a little comic strip the size on the comics page, but they had the thing go across the entire page. like it used to back in the 1940s, where a comic strip ran the full width of the page.
Mhm.
So I did that, and it became real popular. It got a lot of hate mail from Carolina students and NC State students, both of them complaining I was biased.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
you can't please them. uh, but it was a good and doing a lot of editorial cartoons. Now we had Dwayne Powell, who was the editorial cartoonist for the News and Observer, and I did a lot of the editorial cartoons for the Raleigh Times, which was the evening paper at that time.
Mhm.
Um, and so it was that between that and then I illustrated a lot of the covers for the TV magazine insert that they had. Some were realistic, like a realistic portrait of a movie star or TV star, and then some were humorous. If it was like a sitcom or something, I could do it in a Mad Magazine style. And so a lot of that, and this was before computers.
Mhm.
So a lot of the color work back then is we take it for granted today. You just put it in a scanner and it makes the CMYK plates that you had to do by hand back then. We'd have to do an overlay for each color, one for the blue, magenta, yellow, and black, all on separate acetate overlay. And it was sometimes you would do it actually in color with a product called fluoro, which actually came in bottles. It was like painting on acetate, which you can imagine is not very clean. A lot
Mhm.
of the brush strokes show up when you're painting on acetate. Uh, but then the other way was to take shades of gray, like gray watercolor, and do each one on paper that you could see through on a light table, so they would line up properly. And to do all of that in shades of gray, they would shoot it, and then they would have the halftones of shades of gray for each color. Like you'd have 10% yellow, 50% yellow, 70% yellow, and 100% to mix together with the other colors. If you wanted brown, for instance, might be 100% yellow, 50% magenta, and 20% cyan.
Mhm.
And I had all that stuff in my head, which by the time the computer came out, it was really handy. I could go into Photoshop and just, I knew what percentages I needed. I just type them in there and color
Mhm.
would pop
Mhm.
up where I needed. So I think there are a lot of artists today who have no idea how to do approach work in the traditional way before the computer, where you had to do it on paper,
Mhm.
send it to an engraver to get shot. But I tell you, for those that take the time to learn that, even though that's kind of a dinosaur technology today, uh, it just makes you far superior in the digital work too, to be able to know. It's like you're on the wavelength with a computer to all those percentages and things that are just so technical. A lot of them wouldn't even know what we're talking about today. Uh, and After I was at the paper for about, I'd say about 7 years. I was there for 9 years total, but after about 7 years, I started getting phone calls from like McKinney and Silver, the biggest ad agency in the South at that time. Um, and They were right across the street practically from us. And they called, and the guy there said, have you ever done TV commercial storyboards? And I said, well, no, I've never done any, but I imagine it's just like a big comic strip. I could do it. I
Mhm.
was always game, I just throw money at me and I'll do it.
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
so they started using me for during the commercials at that time during the ACC sports season. Well, of course, there was Jefferson Pilot that was one of the clients, but also they had like NCNB, which today is Nations Bank, or it was Bank of America, all of these different names, but it started as NCNB, North Carolina National Bank. And I did those commercials also for Piedmont Airlines, was the airline at the time, from North Carolina, and CP&L, Carolina Power and Light. So I did worked on all those TV commercials. McLean Stevenson from MASH was one of the spokesman for Piedmont Airlines during that time.
Uh-huh.
And then one particular storyboard sequence I was doing, I drew him in his fisherman's hat, like from MASH, with all the lures, in the hat, and he's out there in the middle of the lake talking about his jet ride out to the wherever he was fishing, and he liked it, and
Nice.
so he requested would I be willing to do a watercolor of him in that same scene, and I did, and he hung it in his living room,
Oh,
and that
nice,
was
nice.
cool. Yeah. Uh, so I got a lot of funny stories like that. Another client I worked with over 20 years, Plant Delights, that had me do one cover about carnivorous plants that they were selling. And
Mhm.
in this scene, I had the creature from the Black Lagoon in the swamp, and he's in bib overalls and everything. I got a call from Hawaii, and this guy said, I get these catalogs that you did the cover for, the creature from the Black Lagoon. He said, I played the creature from the Black Lagoon back in that. And I said, are you serious? And he said, yeah. And could I buy the artwork to that cover? I said, man, you scared the pants off of me. I'll give you the cover. So I sent it to him. And that was another cool thing. Who thinks you're going to get a phone call from the creature from the Black Lagoon? You
For
know?
sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Absolutely. One of my favorites, by all means. Yeah. Yeah. But it sounds like you have a lot of mile markers throughout the career, a lot of interesting experiences.
Oh yeah, yeah. I wouldn't trade anything for it. Just and another fringe benefit too of I worked at home after I left the paper in 1983,
Mhm.
uh, right at the height of unemployment. I leave the newspaper, a steady job, to work at home, and but I was working with these ad agencies while I
Mhm.
was still there at the newspaper, and man, that was during the Mad Men era of advertising, and
Mhm. Mhm.
budgets were through the roof. So it was like I I was making more per night than I did in 2 weeks working at the newspaper. So it was an easy decision for me to phase that out and just say, well, I'm going to just work freelance full time.
Oh,
And and I did with 3 children. My wife at the time didn't work, and so here I was jumping out in the high unemployment to do that. And her friends also that worked at IBM said, "Well, if it doesn't work out for him, send him over with us at IBM. We'll give him a job." And incidentally, 10 years later, I'm still working at home, and they laid off at IBM. So
wow.
there's no security anywhere. It's where you make it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and doing that was really great. Having 3 rugrats in the house while I was working at home, they would come into my studio, and like my son would come in there. Uh, he's like 5 years old, and he'd say, "Dad," I'd be right in the middle of a cover, and he'd go, "Dad, doesn't this sound?" And he'd be popping his knuckles. Doesn't this sound like I'm shuffling cards? I, I, I go get a baseball bat out of the car and say, "We need to get outside more." take him out and throw a few baseballs at him.
Yeah,
Uh,
no.
but it was a lot of fun being that, just being accessible to them, like a stay-at-home dad, even though I was working at home.
Yeah,
Boy, that was great. I mean, I was in heaven. And we're close today because of that.
yeah.
uh, they're all, of course, they're all artistic too. My
Mhm.
oldest son has done a couple of children's books, and my youngest son helped me a lot on National Geographic assignments, or do a lot of amusement parks, and helping me color those, because it's like illustration that's everything in the kitchen sink in an
Mhm.
amusement park. And then my daughter has also helped in a lot of that, and they all three have helped in ideas too. Just whatever off the top of their head they would say, it turned out to be a good idea for me. My oldest also has a comic strip. His name is Jay, and his comic strip is Jay Walking on the Wild Side.
Oh,
Um,
nice, nice. Yeah.
yeah, and one of them that cracks me up is he's got the Wizard of Oz cast going through the metal detector at the airport, and of course the Tin Man's setting the thing off, and the Scarecrow going, maybe it's your car keys. So they all have that off the wall humor too.
Nice, nice. That's the comics gene, the artistic
Yeah,
gene.
yeah. It's either a blessing or a curse. I don't know. uh,
No.
you know, seriously, it is a lot like actors are notorious for not wanting their children to go into acting. They don't want that. They don't wish that life for anybody, especially their children. And it's the same way. I've never really encouraged my children to go into art, because it's a tough, competitive world.
Mhm.
But they all have done well in it. They don't today, all of them. My daughter is the youngest, and she is director of the adult services with the Wake County Library System.
Oh, wow.
Um, but they all do different things, and uh, at least they're always accessible when I need a colorist or something.
It's a family endeavor. A family
That's
endeavor.
right.
Now, you mentioned that you like to use traditional methods when it
Yeah.
comes to art.
Right. Yeah. I now I don't know how much these things will show up. All right. Like this. I don't know if that's probably got a glare
Yeah,
on it from the light.
just a little bit, but it looks great
Yeah.
from here, and
Because
I
it's
can put in
behind
the full image. The full image can cover my face. Needs to see my face.
uh-huh. Well, it's Mike Wallace, of course, from 60 Minutes,
Hmm.
interviewing Pinocchio, and Pinocchio's nose keeps getting longer and longer. But
Pinocchio runs for office.
that's traditional watercolor. Just
Nice.
I mean, it's black and white watercolor, but it's watercolor. And I'll send you the actual digital file of that too. And then this is like the way I work. And I don't know if it shows up, but the pencil lines are light blue, non-photo blue.
Hmm.
Uh, and they show there, and then I ink over that. There's one file that I sent you with a dog barking up a tree,
Hmm.
and it shows that from pencil to finished ink and color, and it's got the light blue lines. Now, originally, talk about traditional media, when I would do my inking, I would do the pencil work in non-photo blue colored pencil. So I wouldn't have to erase and gray the line down with an eraser. Um, it kept the black line nice and crisp, to not have to erase. So the light blue that I used then in colored pencil, I still do today. I may do the pencil drawing and just on a sheet of paper and scan it, and it's grayscale, but I'll convert it to light blue because I'm so accustomed to working the old-fashioned way of inking on
Oh,
top of
nice.
light blue. And of course, the light blue won't, it drops out when you convert it to black and white. So I still work traditional, even though I'm working digitally. And a
Nice.
lot of the
Nice.
watercolor that I would use, my main medium was watercolor and ink. Um, I'm much faster traditionally than I am digitally at
Hmm.
that, except for making revisions or corrections. Of course, it's a lot easier to hit undo than to glue on another sheet of paper and paint around it.
Yeah.
But I from working the old-fashioned way, it's helped me a lot digitally to know what to do, so I don't have so many corrections to do.
Mm.
Um, and I think for young people, I advise, like I'm invited, to go to career day at schools and things like that to talk about my field and how to get into it. And I tell them to, even though you don't have to master the old traditional media today,
Hmm.
um, it really helps you if you do know how to do that. And if the power goes out, you can still work
Yeah.
if you do it traditionally and scan it later. But it's that kind of thing that I think so much is lost. I can talk to young kids today that have no idea about the traditional way of working.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you start describing doing color overlays and things like that, and their eyes just glaze over like they don't know what the heck I'm talking about. Uh, and it does give you a better sense of the heart of the art,
Hmm.
to be able to know the old way of doing it. I guess we'll
Yeah.
call it the old way. But I forgot your original question now. Something about
Oh, process. Yeah. And I
yeah.
like that heart of the art statement too. Yeah.
The the process that I go is different depending on what I'm doing. Like if I'm doing a comic strip or a comic panel, mainly my approach to that is actually verbal rather than visual. I think
Hmm.
visually for illustrations, but for creating a gag, I think verbally, a word cue. An example is like I did a Christmas card one year where guys walking by another guy's house and snow is everywhere. And on his roof, you see NOE. And then where there used to be an L is the snow is missing. And so the guy points to the guy that lives there. He says, Noel. And the guy goes, Noel. and, uh, and, that's a word gag that I thought of and then just fit the visual to what that was. So some people think visually and some verbally,
Hmm.
and it just depends on what I'm doing as to which approach I'll do. But I do both.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and some people start drawing to get ideas. They just start doodling,
Hmm.
and one doodle will lead to the next, and then all of a sudden, oh, there it is. That's what I want to draw. And I've done that too, and that's hit or miss with me. Sometimes I just wind up doodling, going nowhere, but then sometimes it's like word association. One thing leads to the next. Uh, so I would advise, trying whatever works best for you, um, and work at it that way. Um, the creative process, uh, as far as drawing goes, I'll do pretty tight rough.
Hmm.
I start with a loose rough, but then if some people who've seen my rough sketches go, "Oh, that's fine, that's great. Let's just go with that." In fact, yeah, you remember when the fax machine first came out? Back in the old days, they called them a telecopier, and it was
Hmm.
a drum that rotated. I had one. You put your phone headset in the cradle, and it would have all these series of beeps while it's going, and a little spark would actually burn the image on the paper as
Mm.
it was rotating. Um, and so I would carry that with me when we would go on vacation. I would go up to Syracuse and where the grandparents were, and I'd be up there. And good benefit of being a cartoonist is you can work anywhere. Anywhere
Mhm.
there's a machine today, anywhere there's email or the internet, you can work. But back then, it was anywhere you could carry your equipment with you. You could send the work in. So we were up there, and I had a project from the one of the assistant coaches for the Washington Redskins had a barbecue restaurant in D.C. and they had me do the ad and do a caricature of him. And so I did the pencil sketch and did it on a Xerox machine to darken the pencil line to black, and
Mm.
then put that on the drum to send them the sketch. They got the sketch. This was going in the Washingtonian at the time, and so they got the sketch and said, "That's perfect. Send us the bill." I said, "Wait, that's just the sketch." But they used the sketch as the finished art. So that was a wild project to be on. Um, and the as far as I guess the procedure for working on other projects, it I mean, like I said, it just depends on what the project was. If I was
Mhm.
doing an illustration project, of course, when I would do stuff for National Geographic, it was for their National Geographic for kids, not the adult version. I'd
Mhm.
be doing humorous illustrations for them. Somehow I got to be the guy to go to for anytime they did something about extraterrestrials. and I was working on one project with them, and they said, "Now, don't do any reference yourself. If anything you need for us, we got a whole team of experts here that will do the reference material for you. Just tell us what you need."
Mhm.
And so, well, that's great. That saves me time. All I have to do is tell them what I need, and they'll send it to me. Well, so we got into this project about aliens, extraterrestrials, and I drew up a few of them, with tentacles and everything. And they called me back after they got the sketches and said, "Our resident expert here says the alien here wouldn't have a trunk like an elephant. He'd have tentacles." and I go, uh, and he's a resident expert. Where did he go to get credentials on extraterrestrial? But they apparently trusted his expertise on what an alien should look like. So I changed it to fit what they wanted. But
Send me an example of that. That's what I would say. Send me an
yeah,
alien. Uh,
yeah.
and I love your
Okay.
Popeye back there, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
He got me started. um, yeah, my website, jptunis.com, has some, of course, a lot of background information and my client list and samples for different categories in my portfolio. Um, and if you Google my name and cartoonist or illustrator or both, you'll probably see a lot. I'm, of course, member of the National Cartoonist Society and the Society of Illustrators in New York. Um, and some of those things may pop up. I chaired with former editor emeritus of Mad Magazine, Nick Meglin. He and I co-chaired a Mad Magazine reunion in Savannah at SCAD
Cool.
uh, several years ago, and also we co-chaired a tribute to Frank Frazetta when we presented him the Lifetime Achievement Award. And I think some of that's on my blog. I haven't haven't written on my blog in 10 years, I don't think, but that particular tribute to Frank is on my blog, and you can access that through my website. Um, but doing a lot Nick and I actually did a lot of interviews together where he was the Lou Costello to my Bud Abbott, and
Nice, nice.
well, on one in particular, it was the host of the show uh, said he'd seen my work over the years. Early in my year, it was signed Jackie. My dad was Jack Pittman, and so I was Jackie at
Mm-hmm.
that time. And as he passed away, I became Jack. I inherited that role. So my if you go back over 50 years, my earlier work might be Jackie Pittman, and then now of course it's Jack Pittman. And so the guy on the host of the TV show was saying, well, now I don't know whether to call him Jackie or Jack. And Nick, without skipping a beat, said, I just call him Jackass. So
We all
working
have
with
our moments, right? We all have our moments.
him, working with him was a lot like uh, you could tell he was the heart and soul of Mad Magazine. Just to hear him talk, it was like hearing the one-liners and the put-downs from the magazine.
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
he was a great guy. I sure do miss him. Um, and and we did a few radio interviews too. One time they were hosting the uh, Norman Rockwell traveling exhibit at the North Carolina Museum of Art, and we co-chaired that.
Cool.
So it's just a great. Nick knew Norman Rockwell personally from interviewing him for his book, The Art of Humorous Illustration.
Wow.
Um, so, and he was not only just a great comedy writer and editor of Mad, he was also a great lyricist and playwright. He wrote the lyrics to Grumpy Old Men, the musical.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and so it's just all the people that I've been exposed to in this life as a cartoonist. It's just blown me away. I befriended Ron Grant, who won an Oscar and Emmy with Steven Spielberg for he composed some of the music in Animaniacs
Oh,
and
wow.
some of the sound effects in the movies that Steven Spielberg did. And he and I were going to do a feature animated film of some nanobots that crash landed on the Earth, and working on their craft, trying to get it back in operating order. And one day, I mean, he just sent me an email, like, I'm psychic. I knew you wanted to hear from me. And
Uh-huh.
then we'd just pick right up where we left off in brainstorming. And so one day I sent him an email back. I'm psychic. I just knew you needed to hear from me. I got a letter back from his wife. I'm
Mm.
sorry to tell you, Ron passed away last week.
Oh,
And so there went I was going to be executive producer with him on that feature film, and it just it didn't happen.
yeah.
Another one that got away was at the time The Simpsons. Matt Groening was going to retire and
Hmm.
stop doing The Simpsons. So I put together a sitcom feature, animated feature called The Wasmans. It's like four guys that had been married and they were divorced now, living in a condo. It was like Odd Couple times four, or
Uh-huh.
two times two, and they were all different personalities. Fox loved it. Fox was ready to replace The Simpsons with it. And then Matt Groening decides not to retire. So I've had a lot of those ones that got away where, it's like pie in the sky, and then, well, never mind.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But certainly an interesting career and so many connections that you've been part of, and love
Yeah,
the way you've taken art, the advice to go into architecture, and you've built something completely different. So I love that.
yeah. But from that experience in architecture, in fact, most of my work today is doing cartoon mets for amusement parks, where
Oh,
I
nice.
do it's the whole park, and in many cases, it's not built yet. So I have to take the architectural plans and interpret it into 3D and draw the thing.
Mhm.
So that information and that learning I still apply today, even though I didn't go into architecture. I still use the skills.
Yeah, well, my day job is teacher, so this is a great moment to go see kids, see, listen, and
Yes.
apply those things. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's another thing. Speak of teachers, when I do the career days, they ask me, what should we study to do
Hmm.
what you're doing? And I say, well, don't just study art. Learn everything you can about history, science,
Hmm.
math, English, all literature, all the things. The more you know about everything, the wider your audience is, because you're going to be able to draw for more people with different walks of life.
Mm,
So I just advise them to learn everything they can about everything.
absolutely. Those ideas that you were talking about that come to the top of your head come from those
Yeah,
places. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Jack, it's been a wonderful talk with you. Is there anything that we've missed that you want to make sure to mention before we close out?
Um, I can't think of anything. Another thing is uh, a lot of young guys that try to get into this work, guys and women too. They they wonder, what do you do when the phone stops ringing?
Hmm.
And it's a feast and famine profession. It doesn't matter how famous you get. It's like Jerry Seinfeld. After he retired from Seinfeld, he and Jay Leno got together, and he says, "Don't you ever worry that the phone's going to stop ringing?" And it's true. Even in art, it's you may be on the mountaintop, making six figures one year, but then the next year you might be down to below poverty level.
Yeah.
So learn to manage your resources, because you're going to have lulls. And when you're on the top, don't spend it all. Put some
Hmm.
aside for the times that you're having to struggle again. Like right now in our field, artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
Everybody's like trying this new way to produce art, and it's replacing a lot of artists. I've had a lot of colleagues that are seriously thinking about getting out of this business and doing something else. The same thing happened when the Macintosh first came out. Uh, Prior to that, artists were just really on top of the world. But once the Macintosh came out, it was like, oh, we don't need the artists anymore. We got the Mac here. We can,
Right.
and they started doing a lot of in-house stuff. And it took a few years before they realized the machine is no more talented than the person using it. The
No.
same thing's going to happen with artificial intelligence.
Hmm.
Uh, it may be a useful tool for cutting some corners and saving time, but it's not any more creative. In fact, it's not as creative as an individual, because more like a mimic. It
Yeah.
copies rather than creates. And it looks like it's creating, but what it's really doing is cut and pasting from different copies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
once that novelty wears off, it's going to be good times for artists again.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
I agree. And I just got invited to do an edited project and book chapter on AI, and that was one of the things I said was it doesn't replace humanity. You have to
yeah.
have the human voice.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, would you want to go to a symphony that's produced by a computer? Every note's perfect, every pitch is perfect. Or would you rather see people who have dedicated their lives to this and
Yeah.
practice day after day after day, and human beings are making this happen? That's what I'd rather see.
Same. Same.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Glad to be in touch. I will put this together in video and audio and share it back your way. And I greatly appreciate the time. It's an open invitation if you ever want to come back and talk about other stories, other connections, and other work that you're doing.
Oh, sure. Yeah, thanks. This has been a pleasure meeting you too.
Yeah,
And
great to meet you.
I'm sure we'll touch base again.
Sounds great. When the graphic novel is in the form that you want it to be in, let me know and we'll do an episode where we showcase it a little bit too.
Okay. And speaking of the graphic novel, we also have in the hopper
Hmm.
uh, five of us who work with MAD are working on a graphic novel that is the last piece of writing of Nick Maglin.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
he wrote the story. We uh, drawing it is a superhero spoof, but all of our chapters, like my chapter with a superhero, may spill over into the next chapter that the other artist is doing. So we
Oh,
overlap into each other's work to make the whole thing cohesive.
love it.
Uh,
Love it. Looking forward to that as well. Yeah, we can talk about either one of those projects as they come to be and as you can talk about them or something else.
yeah. All right. Great.